We rushed this one a little bit in class, but I think it's worth a little more time. This example comes from our reading, and from what I could see in class, it seemed as though not as many of you were as familiar with the reading as you ought to have been had you done your prep adequately for the readiness assurance process. Anyway, with that bit of nagging out of the way, let's consider this application exercise. So the example in the text described this attempt to raise money through a tax on luxury yachts. The problem was that demand for luxury yachts was really elastic. And the reason, of course, is that if you're rich and buying a luxury yacht, the U.S. is one place you could buy it, but there's plenty of other places, France and Monaco and, zillions of other places. And so what happened was buyers switched away to buy the boat elsewhere, and so there was a big quantity response. And we also learned from the example that workers and factories in the sectors simply shut down. So there were a lot of workers put out of work. And then the question asks you to consider which of the pairs of graphs best match the description in the reading. And as I talk, the reason why I'm pausing is I realize that answer B might be a better answer than C. But anyway, let's get to it. All right, here we are. Here are the four options. And basically, the problem gave us that demand was very elastic. So remember that, if the scale of the axes are the same and we're at a roughly similar price quantity pair, which is assumed, the steepness of the curve is indicative of the elasticity measure. Steeper, that is more inelastic, less price responsive. Flatter, more price responsive. Less price responsive, more price responsive. So on that measure, on that understanding, we should have been able to eliminate the possibilities to B and C. So let's go ahead and we're going to just nix A and D because they show demand curves indicating a lack of price elasticity. So then the question is, would a inelastic supply curve, boats supplied to market, regardless of the tax, would that fit the description we have, or is a flatter supply curve is a flatter supply curve more consistent with the story in the text? And now I'm thinking about it. We actually did have a fairly big supply response. In other words, when the tax was imposed, firms didn't just eat the tax. Instead, they produced less. They it's not that they moved their factories into another sector. They just shut down production and laid off a lot of workers. So that indicates a pretty big quantity response. So that B and C were both somewhat defensible, but I think given the resulting unemployment that B is more consistent with events. And let's just explore that a little bit further. Notice that if our initial equilibrium were here, and then the tax comes along, and let's say we're here, so buyers are now paying P1, sellers are now receiving P1 minus whatever the tax was, output has shrunk. So there are some tax revenues. This this rectangle is tax revenues. But because so many people lost their jobs, the payroll tax and the requirement to pay out unemployment insurance, the net effect of the tax on government revenues was actually negative. So this B better fits the story. B, if you were a B or C, you did a good job thinking about it a little bit carefully. I think we can conclude B is a better depiction of what the events in the example, the events described in the textbook example.